Is that new?
Is in progress. I'm wondering if I did something incorrectly.
No, that's something new that comes up.
Oh, okay.
It lets everybody know that you're recording.
There's a recording in progress.
Right.
This is Allison Angelini, the 5th meeting of the Ad Hoc Ag Committee. And I will go ahead and share my screen. Pull up the agenda. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Alrighty. The meeting is called to order at 6:01 p.m. And I'll do roll call. Mr. Holmberg.
Present.
Mr. Taché. Last week I invited Dick to unmute and that worked.
Present.
Hurrah!
I got it.
Mr. Boudreau. Dick, I muted you again just so we didn't have your background noise. So you'll have to unmute when you want to make a comment. Mr. Boudreau will be absent tonight. Mr. Woody.
Present.
Mr. Mogul. I don't see. Mr. Dombrowski.
Here.
Okay. Does anyone have a citizen comment? I ask that you keep comments to under 3 minutes because we have a full agenda tonight, as usual.
Allison?
Oh.
Hi, Allison, this is Rosemary Garsgard, Heritage Hill Farm, 10 Pleasant View, Ledyard, Connecticut.
Hi, Rosemary.
Hi, I just want to, I'm going to be very brief. I want to publicly apologize to you, Allison, for last month for losing my temper with you. And that's all I have to say. And have a successful evening and good night.
Well, apology accepted, of course.
Can I say something? Can you recognize me? Oops.
Is it Miss Parkinson?
Yep.
It's hard for me to see everyone because I have this.
Thank you. Thank you for the some brief comments. I want to have thank you and some suggestions. I want to thank Russ Holmberg for accepting my invitation to visit a horse farm. I invited all of you last meeting, as you recall. We had a very pleasant visit at Mystic Valley Hunt Club during one of their major horse show competition events. And I just want to summarize some of the facts that we shared so all of you are on the same page. Number one, when you review ag tourism on farms, please consider that horse show competitions are not agritourism, but are part of the usual and customary activities of horse farms. Competitions have been part of horse farms venues for over 100 years. And the same is true for riding lessons, summer camps, clinics, educational seminars, and inter-school and intercollegiate competitions. Number two, if you look at the Ledyard business page on the web, you will see that horse farms are listed as a major business in Ledyard, along with industrial parks. Number three, in Ledyard, there are several major horse farms. There are no dairy farms, no pig farms, no major crop growing such as corn and oats farms other than hay fields. Number four, on any given day at these horse farms, these major horse farms, there may be more than 10 cars. Owners taking care of their boarded horses, riding lessons, sometimes riding lessons in groups of 5, their instructors and their parents. Number 5, please note that horse farms contribute greatly to the business climate of Ledyard. We have horses that compete on the national and international level. Their individual value of these horses is in the 6 figures. At a boarding farm with an indoor arena, the individual horse owner can spend an average of $1,500 a month on that horse's care. There are more than 200 lessons per week at our local horse farms. Horse owners support our local veterinarians, feed and hardware stores, restaurants, auto repair facilities, and gas stations. Please do what is necessary to encourage these businesses to grow and flourish in Ledyard. Do not create such zoning complications to make it more difficult. Thank you for your time and good luck in finishing this up in the next couple months. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? We'll move on to review and approval of the prior meeting minutes. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of April 22nd, 2021.
Second, Kevin Nabrowski.
Does anyone have any changes or revisions? Hearing none, all in favor of approval of the meeting minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Russell, did you say aye? I can't see everyone.
Oh, yeah, I said aye.
I only heard three votes.
I didn't click it. I'd make a terrible Jeopardy contestant.
I don't think we'd win anyway. Moving on to old business, which is continuing. Well, actually, you know what? Before I click out of that, I think the first item that we wanted to backtrack on was talking about the zoning regs, but now I see that it's listed under new business. So maybe I'm not allowed to.
That's okay. You can go to new
It
business.
really
first.
was old business because we talked about
Yeah,
it.
no, you can go to new business and that's still fine.
Okay, I think this document just got dropped in the wrong spot on the
Yep.
agenda mistakenly, and I apologize for that. This is, if you remember correctly, at the May meeting, we talked about farm accessory dwelling units, and at some point there had been regulation, and long story short, that doesn't exist anymore. And so Russell or Mr. Holmberg had sent over this document, which was attached to the email. Russell, do you want to describe?
Sure. So, so as you can see, I think that's like probably like actually typewriter typed out. It's been around, but this is exactly, it's in the generations move on kind of thing. It's exactly kind of what we're doing now. My father's just like, hey, I need temporary zoning. And they were like, sure, what kind of makes sense at the time. He said at the time there was a lot of mobile home units going in. So they're just like, yeah, mobile home seems to kind of work. And they kind of worked through all this. And this is the zoning we operated on for up until I think it was 2011 or 2012 when it got dropped. At which point the zoning officer came out and said, hey, we made a revision. You weren't aware of it, but we caught that, or I caught rather, that you're supposed to re-up every year, and guess you don't have to do that anymore because it's gone. And so we continue to operate with his blessings in a certificate of compliance. Moving forward, I don't know if it's in the best interest of the town or this committee to try to get something along this lines in there, or to take it, kind of leave it open, and just with the understanding that should another operator come in with the same needs as us, that, here's something they can just kind of work from a little bit. The part that really caught my eye, I believe that to the more experienced members of the committee as far as what the best way to handle that is, because on the other side of that, this is all temporary stuff. On the other side, there's the permanent, kind of more like a second house, which also kind of came and went. So I can't speak to that, but I had this copy, so I figured it's in the same realm that we've been talking about, at least post it. what struck me on this was if you scroll up, Allison, to like the first heading there was a lot of point 1, 2.1, that, yeah, where your pointer was there, to qualify as a farm. And that had been a lengthy discussion that we had in the first couple of meetings. And I just saw that there's precedent here. And it seemed to be when they had to resolve that. At the time, anybody can grow potatoes and sell potatoes. It's fine. But my dad was asking for a little bit more. I need to do something above and beyond just a regular farm use. And the town came back with, we think it's appropriate that there's just, it's a little extra ask. Here's a little extra burden. And they resolved that at the time in the tax assessor's office, which seems to be where that stuff would probably land. In my opinion, it seems like a good way to resolve that, to say, hey, if you want a kind of above and beyond, we just need to know that you are actually, on file 490 plan. I assume that's what they were looking at there, as an actual farm. So beyond just the housing thing, I thought the document had some relevance to some of the other issues that we talked about as a committee. And for that, I mean, peruse away. I can't imagine that we would pass it requiring a mobile home again. But who knows? Whatever. So however the committee would like to handle that, that's just research, and we had it. And I'd love to see if anybody was able to turn up the one on, there was a house per 50 acres. I think the town was supposed to be looking into that. If they could drag that up, that would be helpful. So that's what I got. If you have any questions, I can attempt to answer them.
No, yeah, I think that's good. And Form M28 still exists.
Oh, there you go.
So, yeah. No, I think there's general agreement that we need something like this. I mean, I know people have come to the zoning commission, and asked, hey, look, I want to be able to have a caretaker. And so I think there needs to be something. I think there's general agreement on that, and it's just getting the parameters right. And so I think using, what you put as a starting point for that is a good idea. I agree with you. I don't think it's probably going to be mobile homes, but it'll just generic out to, it's what we call an ADU, which is, an accessory dwelling unit. And it'll just be more generic in what it is, I think. But no, that's good to see.
All right, so what do we want this to say?
So I don't know if we need to sweat and get that wording exactly right at this point, to be honest. I think that we agree that we want to allow the accessory dwelling units. This solves one particular case. If someone brings another case to us, there's support to figure out how to allow it. And so I don't know if what we need to do is try to cover all those cases right now and worry about this wording too much. Clearly a recommendation from the commission is accessory dwelling units on farms need to be allowed. And we have two cases that we know of, which is the caretaker and the seasonal workers. And so anything that happens needs to cover those cases. That's kind of my thinking on it.
Does anyone else have thoughts?
I kind of agree with Nate. We can just leave the words as they stand. That way the Planning and Zoning Commission recognize that this committee is recommending that accessory dwelling units should be permitted. But I don't think we need to Nate's point. I think the word that we have in there now suffice for what we're trying to, I think with the message we're trying to convey.
Yeah, I think the only notes that I had written about this section were like questioning the acreage, which, there's no sense going back and forth about that number. And then the wording of the individual responsible, which I don't know if that leaves room for housing multiple H2A workers, or, you know, in a situation that I could imagine happening on a farm like ours, where we're having like a family live and take care, and not just one individual.
Well, okay, in that case, you may want to put like, let me see here.
I feel like there isn't really, like, a lot of times a caretaker comes with a partner or a small family, and I can't see that being an issue.
So, yeah, I mean, you can change this to, you know, only by individuals, you know, if you want to make sure it doesn't cover a single person, you know, as far as, you know, family, you know,
No one's gonna.
the zoning official isn't going to run around and worry that a legitimate caretaker for the farm has a spouse, right? I mean, it's, you know.
I didn't know if that would be taken into consideration when they're like, you know, sizing the apartment or whatever, the accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, my issue on the acreage is actually on the other end of the spectrum. Our use of the H2A program is much smaller than a lot of farms similarly sized, and it's not inconceivable here to have a 100-acre plot in town doing nursery work or something like that, where it is a lot of H2A hand labor and they need a lot of housing. But I think that I can see it happening. I don't see it happening like in mass. And I think it's something that could certainly take care of, kind of a, hey, if something comes up, it seems like we could probably take it on a case by case, I would think. So, I mean, I've gone to farms where they have, you know, Quonset huts of H2A guys because they need them, especially around harvest. So it's not our scenario, but it could happen.
By that point, I think, Russ, that we need to add language in there, or at least words in there, not just as caretaker, but as also seasonal workforce housing.
A full or part-time caretaker or seasonal workforce.
Or seasonal work. Yep.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, my guess is that's one where the land use attorney will probably clean up that language significantly there. So,
Right. But in this case, yeah, we're just defining. This is just a definition.
Yeah, it's just making sure we mean caretakers and seasonal help.
Seasonal work. Yep, exactly.
Agree.
Again, we're gonna do our best to get through this. I'm sure there are gonna be lots of things like that get edited and changed. I think we're at breweries. I know it looks like I'm skipping ahead, but we really discussed events venues extensively at our May meeting.
Yeah. So if I can be bold, we have no farm breweries in town. The only ones that we have had have been very early thoughts about wanting to do something. And so my suggestion might actually just be to delete this. And when someone comes to town, worry about what we need to do in order to support that business. Otherwise, this feels very speculative.
Yeah, when I had spoken with the mayor about this section over the summer, he had said that there had been a number of applications.
There has never been an application. There have been a couple that I know of. Let me clarify. Okay. There have been a couple of very early discussions for a couple of properties where people have talked about it. It's never gone beyond that, I don't think. And my concern is, you know, if we go ahead and do, you know, if we want to do something here, if we want to do something, you know, we can say essentially that, you know, look, a farm brewery is a farm. I don't know how much further I would go than that, because we don't have an application, so I don't know if we know how to support these things. That's my only concern.
So the thought would be to delete all of these specifics and just say that a special permit or site plan review is required and it's considered an accessory of an established agricultural operation.
That's probably what I would propose. Yeah.
Russell, you look unhappy.
Oh, yeah, well, I just always look unhappy, don't you? Those are my inherited eyebrows. That's my thinking face. So now you all know. If only we were meeting face to face. No, the question for Nate on that would be, so there's a lot of interest in farm breweries right now. In fact, we were just out on the North Fork of Long Island last weekend with my wife, and we were shocked at, you go out there and it's farms and wineries everywhere, in the business that the farm breweries were doing. That seems to be a real area of interest and growth. Not having anything there where my reflex is yay, like sure, like good. But I just kind of thinking out loud, is there a hazard that you have a well-intended operator who doesn't really understand zoning kind of buy a piece or maybe inherit a piece of ground and say, I'm going to turn into a farm brewery. They start putting tanks up, and then they're kind of moving along without zoning, and there winds up being conflict because, or they looked and they said, there's nothing saying I can't do it. So they just go ahead and do it. Is there any hazard there? So we don't find ourselves
special permit
kind of in the situation. What's that?
Yeah, so,
if we read it like this, then it says a special permit and site plan review is required by the commission. So I think maybe what
Yeah, but
thing is, it'd be taken on a case by case basis.
yeah, but that becomes very subjective.
Okay.
So that's my fear. My opinion is to leave the language as is, because it removes some of the subjectivity. So it's not a case, it should not be a case by case basis. It should be uniform across the town, regardless of where you're putting it. That's the intent of zoning.
Okay.
I don't like zoning regulations that can be subjective, because what works for one person and now all of a sudden we're doing something different for someone else. I don't like subjective zoning. I think the language as it's written should stay.
Can
That's
we,
my opinion.
so if we're gonna keep this, I would probably, so I would get rid of 4, which is the hours of operation.
I agree with that.
I would probably also get rid of 3, because it conflicts with a bunch of other things in the regs as is.
Yep. Okay. I agree with that too.
And so then we've got left a primary residence,
Limits the production capability.
we gotta strike hard cider. That doesn't belong anywhere there. There's a federal distinction there. A brewery can't make hard cider. It needs to go.
Okay.
Why is this line important? That the brewery shall be considered a pilot or nano brewery if the production is less than 15,000 barrels a year.
I think that's what that is trying to say, is that a brewery with a capacity of less than 15,000 barrels a year is allowed in any zone where a farm is allowed. A larger capacity brewery is allowed in the industrial zone. I think that's what that's supposed to say.
Yeah, it gets away from being a farm brewery onto a commercial enterprise. More of a Anheuser-Busch than Narragansett brewery or something.
Russ,
that's my opinion.
Russ, do you know any of these rules on what? Because I know there's all sorts of rules about what the capacities are and what
exactly. Yeah. So I was just going to go there. So for farm brewers, for farm wineries, there was, and when I first scanned these, I was just like, these don't overlay with the state ones. Like there's a problem there. Like, and maybe the best way to handle this, and an attorney can make it elegant, I would think, is something to the effect of, there is a state license for farm brewery. That should be the foundation of it. And if you qualify for whatever those are, whatever the terms are for farm winery or farm brewery, rather, at the state level, like that's a license that you would have to apply for. You should be pretty well good, because most of that's going to be spelled out in that text anyway. Like like looking at this, it's a lot of redundant kind of rewriting. is there a way we could use this, that, you know, you have to hold a state license by default, that takes a lot of this out of here?
I think we can. I mean, I think we can say, because the Connecticut Farm Brewery is defined in statute. So what that is defined in statute. You know, there's the rules about where your materials come from. I believe there's limitations on capacity. I don't honestly know. You know, but all of that is defined in statute. And so I think we can just say, we should probably put this for doing some research before the next meeting, just to verify that any farm brewery that meets the state statute definition of Connecticut Farm Brewery would be allowed in any district that farms are allowed. Is that kind of where I think we're going?
Yeah, the only other, so yeah, I know we work a little bit with these guys. And I just know a few of them, and I'm always scratching my head because one guy's a brewery, one guy's a brew pub, one guy's a farm brewery. You know, it's like, and each one of them can do slightly different things.
Yeah.
Like one person can bring in hard liquor, another person can't. One person can get from other breweries, another one can't. Like it's very confusing. But yeah, I would just leave it at farm brewery. The only thing that we might want to consider is an acreage requirement on that. I don't know if there's an acreage requirement attached to the farm brewery. If there's not, for the sake of the town, it might be a good look. I can tell you, just last weekend, what struck us about the farm breweries was the amount of traffic. I mean, my jaw was just on the ground to see hundreds and hundreds of cars lined up on a Saturday morning. So just might be something, there's a lot of interest in it, you know, just might be something worth thinking about.
Like I know for wineries, you have to grow a percentage, 20% or whatever of the grapes that you use after a certain number of establishment years. Is this the same true for?
I think the difference is that for a farm brewery, you have to purchase it from Connecticut. I'm not sure you have to grow it on site. I think you might be able to purchase it from Connecticut, but I'm not 100% sure on these. I've looked at these in the past, but I think that might be the difference.
Well, if it's a special permit, I take that back. If it's a special permit with a site plan, that can probably sweep up a lot of those issues. But
I mean, it may be reasonable. I mean, I certainly know, you look at like, Fox Farm up in Salem or something like that, their initial guess, right, greatly underestimated the amount of room they needed. And so, it may make sense to put some sort of, an acreage limit here, just to provide a, kind of a lower bar.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
so I'll look into the state statutes.
I think that's a good place to start.
I think it's a lengthy document is my only.
I think it's a little brutal. Yeah. But, so I will say, our land use attorney did just read, just went through a bunch of the new statutes on this stuff to try to understand this stuff. So he may be up to speed on this. So it may be reasonable I can send him a question, about the farm breweries and talk to him about that a little bit and bring that back for our next meeting.
If you could do that, that would be great.
Yep.
So yeah, so that document is at the omnibus rewrite that happened that went into effect by July 1st of last year, which was supposed to be a well-intentioned simplification. Of course, it never is.
Yeah.
It is like 75 pages, but the part that deals with this stuff isn't that long. Like the functional ends of it really isn't that bad. And I've been involved with that, around that area for like 10 years now. And I got a pretty good handle on what's involved in that doc. It's not that bad. It's really not that bad. So
is that you volunteering to read?
No, that's not. As I'm talking, I'm like, how do I walk myself back out of this?
Sounded like
I mean, it's very confusing. When they redid it, I forgot what they did. So
Yeah.
but,
No,
but I think we're all on the same page, right? I mean, the idea is, as defined there in statute, we intend to allow those. And we just want to understand what those limitations are in the state statute.
yeah. My point was don't be afraid by the document. I'll scan through it. It's really not that bad. It's not. We'll get through it.
I think it's like 75 pages. You can do that in a night.
That's right.
If you need any help, I've gone through it several times over the last month and a half. And I'd be happy to work with Russell. I apologize. I thought the meeting was 7 o'clock. We just closed the winery and I'm here. I apologize. So business first, I got to get to, make a living and then. Anyway.
Yeah, we were just discussing that we want to make farm breweries allowed. We want to make sure that they're following state statutes and that our regulations aren't creating much limitation beyond that, but that we wanted to better understand what those state statutes were so that we could clearly articulate that here. So we're going to do some research before the next meeting and keep things moving tonight.
Okay.
And you arrived just in time.
I apologize. I'd be happy to help Russell in his endeavor.
Farm wineries.
No, I'm helping you, Paul. You just volunteered. You don't know it yet.
Oh.
You're on point.
We all did nose goes and then you on, so.
That's what happens when you show up late. You should see the list of work we assigned you in the first 30 minutes.
I had no idea. Okay, fine.
It's all right, Paul. I have to leave early, so after 7, you reassign all the work to me.
Humbug on that. Okay. I'll mute.
Well, don't mute because the next section is farm wineries.
There you go.
It says pending, and you had volunteered for it the last meeting to.
Yes, I did. I did send you a little note on farm wineries as a definition, and
Is this what you sent over?
yeah, that is. That's basically based on Stonington's regulations that have been very tested in time. Their old vineyard there is the oldest is Stonington, of course, is well, I would say it's more than almost 30 years old now. And then you have Saltwater, of course, which is new and is using this Public Act 1924 for its craft beverage permit, as well as using some of the other things in the previous regulations as well. So Stonington regulations seem from a winery point of view to be a very good model to start with because they've been successful over the years. And they're in center of ag tourism in terms of westerly to Stonington, westerly to Mystic. They're sitting in the middle. We're on the outskirts. So looking at what they're doing is really a good point of view in terms of our focus is ag tourism, I believe. So from that point of view, I think it would be good to look at their regs and incorporate what we can. Okay.
So I don't have a problem with that, but it's worth pointing out so I have to do it to you, Paul. So the difference of you're showing here and Stonington's regs, right, are the last line where it says all of these things are permitted so long as they are expressly permitted by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And wineries in Stonington require a special permit process in order to land. And so, my suggestion would actually probably be to be much simpler and to not go much past saying farm wineries are allowed. They're farms. And as farms, they have access to all of the other accessory uses that we've already listed through that same process, which should give you access to all of this stuff that's listed here, just without singling it out special for wineries.
Gotcha. I understand what you're saying. I don't disagree with you. Also, I would mention that they are talking about a zoning for events where they have sort of what we did with down in Gales Ferry, that they have a cluster zone around the several farms down there, and they are looking to focus them on ag tourism. I would also try to put that together. I was sort of busy this last week and a half or so with a permit or two. And once that is now in place with the state, I am so open to work with and whoever would like to on that group permit that would allow ag tourism and larger farms, so to speak. It doesn't have to be large farms only, but you know, we could talk about that too. That was something I've been working on earlier on. I believe I proposed it at the previous meeting. And go ahead. So where do you want to cut it off, Nate?
Am I copying something here, or are you gonna create something?
No. I'm not trying to create something new. Absolutely. I'm trying to interact with Nate here.
Yeah, no. So I mean, let's see. So what I would say is so the thing we want to be careful about is we don't want to put a ton of definition in here. I mean, does a winery need to have 15 acres?
No.
That seems like a big parcel.
Yes.
Sorry, what?
That's a lot of grapes.
It's not so much the grapes as the other activities you have associated with farming events.
Yeah. So for me, that's why I like trying to catch that in the event regulation, you know, because then it's, look, if it's enough space for a winery to do this, then it's enough space for a beet farm to hold the same event. Right. And that's my thing is, so, you know, let's just make farm wineries our wineries or our farms. And so I think the use that we do want to make sure that we call out is, you know, tasting rooms are understood to be accessory to a farm winery, right? Probably in a way that they aren't to other farms. All of the other stuff, I think, falls under the other regulations that you'd pick up.
Okay. I would say that the 15 acres is simply the total amount of land. The state does require a 5-acre minimum. Used to be a lot less than that, but and there were several wineries that resisted that, but most everyone has more than 5 or more acres now. I'm not sure about that, but I'm not looking at other folks.
That's 5 acres of production.
Production,
So
that's correct.
you really can't meet a site plan with, you needed like 10 acres or so to meet the state's definition of a farm winery. These 5 acres in production. So, I mean, you put head lanes on that and buildings and parking lots. And
well, not only that, we live in an area where we have a lot of clouds. And in the morning, for example, we have created fields away from our fields where the clouds go away from the grapes so that we don't have it lingering on the grapes too long. It allows the sun to then burn off that moisture and diminuate the production of mold. So we don't have to spray as much as we would if the clouds had stood there. So getting rid of the trees and creating fields around the fields where these clouds can go in the morning. And we see that almost every morning here. We get a tidal influence in the morning. I'll leave you go. Peace.
Yeah. Can we articulate something similar here as we were discussing with the breweries and that farm wineries meet the definition or meet state statute definitions?
Yeah, a farm winery is a farm that meets the Connecticut statute definition of farm winery. And we can look up the reference for that just so that, you know, we point directly where it should be in the statute.
Okay, I'm good with that. If Russ, you're good with that?
Well, I'm just going to write, this isn't set in stone.
I know.
Writing something and then we can discuss what's written, but it's helpful to have like everyone looking at the same thing. We can. That was a line from the other definition that we were talking about including. So a farm winery is a farm that meets the Connecticut state definition of a winery, insert the reference. Land that is used for growing, bottling, and production of wine and wine products and include activities such as the retail sale of wine, beer, Connecticut craft beverages, and a tasting room.
All right. So
And then do we need to include something like requires a special permit or site plan review?
That could be another component somewhere else. I mean, why put it in the definition? You're going to have another section B or something like that, or?
So I feel like maybe I'm confused because we're not in the definition section of where we're working now.
I understand. I'm catching up.
You know,
Yeah, I mean,
it's good to say like it shouldn't be in the definition section or it can't be in the definition section, but I'm looking at it as though it's not simply a definition.
All right.
yeah, I mean, I think probably what we would want to say is that a farm winery probably requires a site plan review, and accessory uses as defined elsewhere in the regulations are subject to whatever is needed for that, right? So, because a lot of that stuff, doesn't require any permitting, but the events would require a special permit, but just defer it to those uses, right? The establishment of a farm winery does not require a special permit. It just requires a site plan.
But
That makes sense?
But it does also, but it would not entitle you to do weddings there, correct?
Correct. In order to do that, and I think that's probably what we'd want to make clear is that, it is for both breweries and for wineries that, this is a farm. Once you're this farm, then you may need additional permitting for any of the accessory uses defined in this regulation.
So a farm winery requires a site plan review by the commission and may require a special permit for accessory uses.
No, I think we just say something like, figure out the words here, but essentially would require separate permitting for other accessory uses. It's horrible wording, but we can figure that out.
What's the grunt, Paul?
Well, accessory uses, customary to wineries throughout the world are.
So no, I think that Paul's right. So what we want to say is accessory uses as defined in 8:15:27. Can someone remind me what right? Because the accessory uses that are defined in this regulation.
Right.
Well, I'd just say they're customary and uses, accessory and customary uses. They're basically, all right, are right.
I don't think that's what
You
we're
don't think
talking
by
about.
right? I mean, it's,
As defined by other regulations. That's so we define them elsewhere, what the accessory uses are. That's what Nate is trying to say.
well, it's defined, yes. Accessory uses. And if they're not defined, Kevin, are they permitted?
No,
See, that's an issue because frankly, you can't control business that way. It really makes it unprofitable. You have to allow, a process where if.
so the process is you allow it in the regulation and you put it in the regulation. I don't disagree with you, Paul. But
The process, let's say there's something he wanted to do, like a wedding, that's not in the wedding regulations at this point in time. Is there a process in place to allow a permit to be given or taken or paid for, or whatever it is the process is?
Yes, right now, right in the page above it, you would become you'd be able to do large events, right? And so you would apply under that process to become a event location or whatever the word we used was.
right.
And so that's what that sentence is supposed to mean, is that once you're a farm winery, you have access to everything in this regulation.
In other words, we don't want to define it in two locations, Paul. So basically here you're saying that a farm winery is allowed in all of the permitted uses that are defined in these regulations, you're eligible to apply for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. As I'm like thinking through it, it kind of puts the vineyard and the beet farmer kind of on the same plane, that you can plant beets or grapes and you can have weddings in the beet field or you can have weddings in the vineyard, both with a special permit. You don't have to make beet wine, but if you wanted to, you could. Like it kind of makes it kind of you kind of keep jumping up. But from the butter's perspective, it's a friendly thing to do, to say, hey, look at the neighbors took that hayfield and they're growing grapes. Isn't that beautiful? You know, no issue there. Well, now they want to start making wine, having a tasting room. Is that okay? Oh no, is there going to be weddings here every night? You know, there's some spots there that kind of pad out if you got neighbors or butters that aren't super happy with what you're doing on your farm.
Well,
You can still do the farming. It's all that extra stuff that seems like there's some sort of insulation there. That seems to make sense.
that was the purpose behind the 15 acres plus size of property. So the point is, abutters would not be impacted at that point in terms of noise or sound or parking, et cetera, light, all those issues that we deal with. So basically, because we have such distance between us and our neighbors, actually the neighbors say, what's on your music list next week? So, and they do help us harvest, and they basically come over and recommend, well, did you see this and that, a bluebird nest at that row 35? Because they're walking through the vineyard all the time.
But Paul, it only takes
Go
one
ahead.
sour grape.
I know.
Seriously. And that's all you need.
Everyone works hard to maintain good relationships with their neighbors, but
Right.
I think Russell's just trying to say that sometimes it's a precarious situation, and so we want to keep things equal.
Right.
I don't love the idea of acreage requirements,
No, okay. Yeah, I see that.
but I'm never gonna love the idea of acreage requirements.
Well, and look, to be fair, an acreage requirement is just a cop out, for trying to deal with the buffering stuff, because it's hard to do, right? It's really hard to get, the buffering regs right so that it works for everyone. But the thing that I like, again, about separating it this way is it lets us put all of those regulations in one spot, right? It lets us put it in that, large event area. And so we only have to get that right once. And try to make it the same for everybody.
We agree that this is okay for tonight?
Yep.
Food trucks are permitted as an accessory use to a farm and only require a zoning permit with a site plan showing adequate parking for the food truck use, in addition to parking required for other uses on the farm.
Excuse me, but on the farmer's market, do they require a zoning permit to have the food trucks there? I mean, why would we need a zoning permit to have a food truck? I understand the site plan, because you want setback, you want to be able to have parking for everybody and no lights and no traffic issues and this sort of thing. However, food trucks at the fair, I don't think they have a zoning permit to do that.
So
When they move to the new site, now that's another deal.
if there's a site plan, there's a zoning permit. And so the way that we have dealt with food trucks in the past is that they are restaurants. And so if they pull up on a private property, they become a restaurant on wheels. And so that's how we've dealt with them.
Hello.
Meaning, like, how does that actually play out? Because I feel like a food truck can be different than a restaurant in a lot of ways.
No, they have a permit and licenses and insurances, very similar to a restaurant.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the example,
That permitting process for a food truck, I'm pretty familiar with. But I'm wondering, like, I mean, we've had food trucks at our farm before for events.
So if we, yes.
But the idea is that we would need a zoning permit with a site plan prior
so yeah, so the
event, separate from being approved to have events.
No,
well, so if you held events and you wanted to include food trucks, right, you would just include on your site plan, this is where, if we have food trucks, this is where we're going to park them, right? I mean, that's what you would do. And so it would all still be one permit. So the example, probably the best example that I can give you of The last time we did a zoning permit for a food truck was Yoko Loco down at the Cartway. There at the corner of 12 and Long Cove. And so, you know, what that was essentially finding a place where the truck could get parked and that people could get off of 12 without running people over, shortcutting between 12 and Long Cove. And so that's essentially what the site plan and permit approved.
So this item is talking about like a regular event. I mean, Yoko Loco was at Cartway for every ish Saturday, I don't know, for a while. This isn't talking about like if we want to have the pizza truck come one Saturday.
Well, so look again, so,
This
you know,
is like if we want a food truck on our farm.
if you want to have a place where you're going to regularly have a food truck, right? So you're going to have it, you know, every Saturday all summer or something like that. Then yeah, you're going to want to have a permanent.
Not for a single event.
Look, when something happens singly, nobody notices. You know, the other thing is that if you have a one-time use, if you have a food truck, right, there is you'll have to correct me, Kevin, right? I believe it's a peddler's permit. Is I think the town ordinance that you have to get. So if you want to park a food truck in a parking spot on the side of the road, you technically need to go get a peddler's permit from the town and signed by the police chief in order to park that truck there. You know, and so that it's
in that case, that's what the food truck is doing. That's not what a farm is doing. The farm is doing.
well, the farm is providing a place for that food truck to park, right? And for people to park in order to get food from the food truck. Sorry, Paul.
No, go ahead. In some of the regs that, for example, the craft beverage permit, you're required to have food as a component of what you're serving in terms not just wine or cider or distillates. The other thing is that a use, let's say it's subordinate and customary to the primary use, let's say a tasting room or something, or an event. I mean, I would see that would say, it's in section 2.2, the use, building structure, or the portion therefore customarily and incidental and subordinate to the principal use of the land and building located on the same lot as the principal use. Basically, a food truck would fit in as an accessory use in terms of if it's a component of what you have to do to meet your permit for the state to sell food. That's part of it. And the food truck might get that. Also, prepared foods would do that the same within the tasting room.
I think that'd be a really hard argument to make.
That was a big issue with COVID, though, because the craft breweries couldn't open unless they had a food truck site.
So I agree, but essentially, but again, recognize what this regulation says. It says, yeah, you can have a food truck. And what you have to do is you have to stop by town hall with a picture of your property, show that you have a place for the parking truck to park and get a zoning permit, right? There's no site plan review, right? There's no special permit. It's a pretty low bar. And what this does is it makes sure that it's called out specifically that you are allowed to have food trucks on your property. Because right now, the rest of the regulations classify food trucks as restaurants. That's how we deal with them. And so this is trying to provide a shortcut to say, yeah, look, if you want to do a food truck, you can.
And Allison, the site plan thing, I know it says, yeah, you need a site plan, but you need a site plan for every zoning permit. And in the case of where I went to go put a new replace a shed, I just took a printout of the GIS map off of the town website and drew in a pen that this is where I was putting the shed. So we're not talking having to go get a surveyor and do a detailed A1 survey, A2 survey map.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
What is the cost associated with doing that? I mean, is there any cost involved in getting a permit, Kevin, when you've got your shed?
Yes, there is.
How about a food truck? Would there be a cost associated with that?
There is always a cost associated with processing a permit. But to your point, This would be a permitted use as an accessory to your, what you're doing. It's just that this is how you do it. That's all we're saying. You may not agree with the
No.
way they're doing it, but that's what that is. This is telling you what you need to do to have the food truck to meet your requirements.
It just seems like an awful lot of restrictive use. It's certainly restrictive to business development, that's for sure.
We can't have a free-for-all either, Paul.
No, we don't have a free-for-all, remember?
That's what you're asking
15,000
for,
people
Paul.
in
Paul, that's
47
what you're
lots.
asking for. I'm gonna hang up here in a few minutes because all you're asking for is a free-for-all. So you can do whatever you want to do. And that seems to be all you're after.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate your point of view. Are you hanging up now?
Can we agree that this is reasonable?
We agree to disagree.
I don't think we love it, but I think it is probably good enough for now. That seems to be the overall sentiment.
Yeah, that seems to be where we sit on a lot of issues. But in the interest of like, I would really like to get through everything tonight so that at our last meeting in June, we can have a relatively clean document to work through from the beginning again, which is ambitious, but you know, we've crossed out a lot of stuff and added in a lot of stuff, and it's just a lot.
Yeah. So this is exactly what we have in the currently approved regulations. So this is just a relocation of the existing regulations here, the seasonal roadside stand and farm stores. So this is what we have had for a while, and just relocated to here, just so people know.
I think in the definitions, though, we had changed seasonal roadside stand to farm stand. Does anyone disagree?
You're right. I agree.
I can scroll up. We talked about removing seasonal from things because so much of Connecticut agriculture happens year round now.
Yep.
And so we had defined both a farm stand and a farm store as buildings or structures which agricultural products are sold. And so, not to make you all car sick, but I think it would just say farm stand and farm stores and remove roadside so that it matches the definitions. Or we could add roadside up there. But
No.
I don't
Yeah,
know
I
if it
agree
necessarily
with you
needs
saying.
to go
Yep.
along the road. The purpose is to allow the sale of, again, we had agreed to remove seasonal.
Get it? We all agree.
Agricultural and farm products grown on the farm where the farm stand is located or that is grown on other local farms.
I'm good with that.
Farm stands are permitted in all districts as follows. That feels confusing to me because we're not listing anything after that for training to the districts. It should just say they're permitted in all districts.
With the following provisions.
Yeah.
So instead of as follows, but with the following provisions.
Because A, B, and C and D are the conditions, essentially.
I understand better now. Farm stand require a zoning permit only. Farm stand building or structure shall not exceed a gross floor area of 200 square feet. Farm stands shall be on private property, set back at least 10 feet from the paved roadway surface, not on a right of way, and at least 50 feet from any intersection. No more than one farm stand shall be permitted on a farm. Farm stores, do we need to include where it's defined if it's defined in the definitions? Farm stores of any size require a special permit site plan approval in residential districts and site plan approval in all other districts.
That looks good.
Comments?
I think it's fine. It's not something we've had problems or complaints with.
Moving on then. We're not talking about home farms.
I think you can delete it.
Site plan requirements.
So with that, I got to apologize, but I've got to bolt.
Thanks, Nate.
Good night, Nate.
Good night, Nate.
We'll
Hi,
try,
Paul.
we'll try and talk to you a lot about you during the recording.
I expect a long email in an hour or so with all the things that I'm expected to do. But I'll listen to the recording and finish the minutes up for you. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
All agricultural uses requiring a special permit shall provide the following. Expected maximum parking and parking spaces adequate to meet the needs of the farm and all of its uses. Parking shall be provided in accordance with ZR section 10, may be permeable or paved and striped or not striped. On-street parking is not permitted.
What are statutory requirements for handicap parking? That we allow it, or that we sign it for? How many spaces are we supposed to have?
Are we good with number one before we move on to number two?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Compliance with statutory requirements for handicap parking and handicap signage.
I just, what statutory, what are they, what are the requirements?
you have to go read whatever the state statute is for ADA compliance.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's just required by
That's required by law.
law.
Right,
It's not
right.
it's not really a zoning thing so much.
No, okay. All right.
So, and basically all that's trying to say is that there is a whatever parking area that you do have to develop for whatever your use you're doing, then you have to have the number of handicap parking spaces in accordance with. If the statute says you have 5 and you need 1 handicap, if you have 10, you need 2, or whatever the number happens to be. So we're not going to define that because that's defined by state statute.
Sanitary facilities and the maximum number of expected daily visitors they'll serve. Sanitary facilities may include portable.
That's defined by Ledgelight, and they inspect 5 times a year. I was just recently subjected to their inspection and was approved. They defined that. They actually, initially, when we put our new room in, they actually ran a dye test to the waste facility, this treatment facility, and see that we had enough space for about 300 people in our we have a septic system for the winery itself. So yes, I think that, do we need to say that here if the Ledgelight Health District is doing it there? I mean, is it redundant to do it here? Or can we allude to the Ledgelight as a more effective?
And I think that's what I was thinking, Paul. And put something that says as defined by the health district.
The health district, sure. Because those rules will change based on the situation. And each of us is a little bit different, so.
So I think to really make that true wording, I think the first, it's got to be a comma, so it's got to be sanitary facilities. I think, and to support the maximum number of expected daily visits. Yeah, there you go. Do you agree with that, Paul?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's well written, actually.
All right, number 4, waste management provisions and how they're adequate for the expected number.
Also, again, as defined by the health district.
Correct.
Yep. Month, days, and hours of operation.
Actually, the health district did that too. And basically, because of the septic system, they defined how many people would be flushed. How many flushes.
Well, this is
When you
your,
submit a zoning permit, it goes to Ledgelight
Yes,
Yeah.
it
for
does.
approval. So
Yep.
I'm not sure we need to like explicitly write as defined by the local health district at the end of every single one of them.
no,
If
in
they're
that case,
going to look at the application on their own.
yeah, but in this case here, this has nothing to do with the health district. This has to do just to identify to the town what your expected normal operation schedule would be. That's all. So this isn't the health district. This is just saying that, hey, we plan on being open 365 days a year from 7 to 7, if that's what you choose to do. It's just more of a notification to the town that what's the expected operation.
Good.
Although I find that with that question, can I go, is this for farms or is this for all the other stuff that's incidental to it?
Farms, isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
this is for special permits. Okay.
Agricultural uses
It's
required.
requiring a special permit.
everything.
Okay, gotcha.
I
Okay, never
imagine
mind.
a lot of these things.
'Cause I know a farmer is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So
Yeah, but not.
not for these
Not
extra
all farming
things.
requires a special permit.
No,
This isn't-
this is other uses that require a special permit.
correct. This isn't.
Yeah.
Can I hoe my beets
Yep.
that
I just wanted to make sure that,
morning?
okay,
Exterior lighting for walkways and parking areas, if any. All lighting shall be full cutoff or other acceptable form of lighting that prevents light trespass beyond the boundaries of the farm.
Allison, all this just seems like boilerplate, and I don't have problems with anything except for that line. That's where it can that could get expensive pretty quick. Not that septic isn't. If and I'll default to the group here, but if there's any way to winnow that down, that could be, especially for large events, that lighting can be difficult. That's all. So, but if everybody else,
how about instead of prevent, put minimizes?
yeah, it just.
Because you're right, you're not gonna keep all light from not escaping off the property. I agree with you, Russ.
Yeah, I know, just anecdotally we have friends that farm in another town, and they went for a farm brewery, and they were like, oh my gosh, we spent what we spent on the septic trying to put in light posts and wiring and contractors and bollards, and it's just, this is for a farm, this isn't for Walmart. Like, I just seems like it should be handicapped a little bit for the infrequent use and the kind of the farm nature of it. That's all.
I don't disagree with that. Fine.
Are there any other edits then, Russell, to this phrasing?
It's probably,
Actually, why don't you strike everything off of the lighting after the word lighting? All lighting should be full cutoff or other acceptable form of lighting. Boom.
That's helpful.
You really want it for public safety.
yeah.
What are you imagining? Like you're having inadequate lighting in your parking lot after doing the
Oh, for me?
Prime corn maze or?
Oh, yeah, right. So let's say it's not me. So it's a new applicant. They come to the board and they're like looking at doing events, and they're going to do, like us, 6 events at night, six events after 6 o'clock a year, and that's it. I think it's an undue burden to be like, oh, you have to put posts and ballards in and light the whole thing when it's a temporary event. And you could certainly get by for those 6 nights a year, like the fair does, with just some temporary construction lighting, something like that. And that's exactly the situation we had friends get into, where they're like, yikes, like to the point where we're just going to limit our hours so that we don't need lighting, where it's basically I'm just thinking a lot of the events you can get by with pretty minimal lighting. You want to like the fair does, basically like the fair does. So you put a couple light towers up and you're probably fine, but I don't know.
The other thing is you're so off the street up there. We do your corn mazes and your events. I don't think you're going to have a neighbor that's going to be impacted. Very similar to us. I mean, our neighbors are so far away that yes, we can have lights and music, but it's not really impacting them. And we're the darkest place in town, basically over here.
Yeah. And I'm really worried about like the next guy, because I just was something that had come up with other towns where it was on the books, and they looked at it and they're like, oh yeah, and they wound up having to put like your CVS in, and it was just undue burden. That's all.
It is definitely.
So yeah, Paul, this whole thing is that it's not so much to existing activities that are going on within town. It's also for the future farms that come in that would have to try to adhere to that, and there'd be no practical way that they'd be able to do it.
True.
Permanent outdoor stages, pavilions, and seating.
There should be location of at the beginning. Because that's what you should be identifying, right? The location of any permanent outdoor stages. That's as part of the special permit.
That makes sense to me. Location and noise. The location of outdoor events and activities associated with agritourism. We got rid of activities, right?
Yep.
On the farm shall take into consideration the current use of surrounding properties. Commission and/or ZO may require specific separating distance and/or appropriate buffer strip that screens any such activity from adjacent properties.
Can you get rid of noise? Because we have no noise ordinance to adhere to. There you go.
This line feels uncomfortable to me, to regulate based on the current use of surrounding properties, meaning that like if something were to change with one of my neighbors, that would affect my application process.
Doesn't that interfere with right to farm as well? I mean,
Allison, I read that it is the other way around. That
Right.
you have a permit, and then a neighbor builds on what was a vacant lot. They knew what they were getting into when they built that. So I looked at as actually protecting you, not the other way around. And I might be wrong, but my read on that was
I read it
at the
other
time
way.
of the permit, it was a wood lot, and we considered that adequate screening. Somebody turned that into a house. Well, you were existing. They did that with the full knowledge of what they were doing.
Remember, you got the special permit. Special permit goes with the land, so it's as effective as the date. The effect of the permit is the date it was submitted. So if somebody were to build something, to Russ's point, adjacent to what was once a vacant lot, the special permit still holds. You can't null and void the special permit because it goes with the land. And that's why it says to the current use. So if you're taking into consideration what you want to do for your special activity, and hey, I don't have to worry about the neighboring property down to the south of me because it has been a vacant field and overgrown with trees and is a forest. You get special permit, you're good to go. 3 or 4 years later, somebody builds a development and clear cuts that property. Well, your permit is still good because you can't predict what somebody's going to do with a piece of property adjacent to you 2, 3, or even a year from when you apply for your application.
Hmm. It's just that it seems taking consideration to be subordinate to the surrounding properties. Is there a way of stating that differently?
It just doesn't.
It does seem to be subordinate to current to surrounding properties.
Go ahead.
I know
That-
this is the date idea, but that's a great idea. But
of everything we've talked about in this whole document, as far as I'm concerned, that is probably one of the most important paragraphs. I like it just the way it is. The point is, if you're going to change the use to some sort of tourism activity, and the town probably should maybe take a look at it, and they're going to handicap what activities you can do against who you're impacting. And I think it would make sense that the board would say, hey, you know, there's a 1 acre subdivision right next to you. You know, you can't have Woodstock there. Like, it kind of makes sense versus you're at Lake of Isles, you got 200 acres all around you. Yeah, go to town. Like that, to me, all that makes a lot of sense.
All right. Yeah. I'm good with whatever everyone else is good with.
I'm good with the way it's worded right now.
Okay. Sign shall be in accordance with 815K.
Yeah, this just means they're in accordance with the sign regulations.
We haven't, yeah. All right, so all of this is good. Special permit standards for large events venues. Is this anywhere else in the zoning regulations? Because at a certain point, like, this doesn't have to do with farming. You know, when we talked about large events venues, those were for, like, largely for non-agriculturally related events. And I was just wondering if this is elsewhere, because some of, like, the 3 days a week, the noise, you know, I don't
think 3 days a week is so bad. You could talk about ag tourism here, perhaps, and that would, it does seem to have defined away from ag tourism. Doesn't seem to complement it. Instead of for large farms, for ag tourism venues or something like that.
Well, but we discussed large events venues specifically here. And so this would be the requirements if you were going to have a large event, which I don't see how wine tastings
No, I don't either.
necessarily fits in, because that seems like an incidental use of a farm winery. That's why I asked if this is specifically for agriculture, because I guess if, like, a package store wanted to do a wine tasting, like, I don't know if that's also what this is discussing.
I think they're trying to allude to time here, but
But like meetings, I mean, we already discussed if we're going to have a 4-H meeting at Holmberg Orchards, like, we don't need a special permit for a large.
But we've also hosted corporate events, and I think that's more what that's getting to, where we have like 100 people. Like, we haven't done one in a decade, but I think that's more what, you know, we get these one-offs, things like that. And there's farms that certainly target that business, caterers that target that business. I think it's not 4-H. I think they're talking about, you know, you got fly-ins and you need a place to land. So instead of doing it at Ocean House, you're going to do it at Stonington Vineyards.
well,
So I think, go ahead, Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
no, saltwater certainly would fit that bill. There is a zone that's how do you say, a floating zone, trying to work on now, which would fit this a little more. It would amplify this whole area, and this just is too defining, too small, and doesn't really address a lot of issues here. I would like to go into the floating zone and put that out there for someone to, even before the next meeting, send it out to everybody and, without stepping on anyone's toes here, and let them read it and give me some feedback to it and see what you think.
I mean, essentially, this just says that events have to end at 11. And if you're going to have noise, it can only be 3 days a week.
So in this case here, I
Which
think what
feels reasonable. I just don't understand, like.
You want to stick that back under up a couple pages?
yeah, I'm about to say, I think that actually belongs under what you would call the large events as what would be defined as large events and the permitted uses or the permitted times. I probably would take wine tasting out of it though.
Because if we're talking specifically about agriculture, then I would assume it's a farm winery.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't think you can make that assumption. It's a wine tasting at the beet farm. So I don't know. I don't think it's hurting anything being in there, but whatever. I also don't think anybody's going to nitpick it in practicality either.
Like that?
I think it fits there better.
That feels better. We need to look up the state statute for music and amplified.
I think it's 68 decibels, something like that.
That's whatever the state statute is for
That's the
noise.
state statute, yeah.
We need to know, I need to know what.
Agreed. Look it up.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. But yeah, we'll have to get that one.
Want to put that on Nate's list?
Yeah. Hey, you got an action.
There you go. All right. That makes more sense there, I think. Home husbandry, we'd agreed that we weren't discussing. This is all what's currently in place anyway.
In reality, you gotta remember, home husbandry doesn't apply to farms. It applies to me on my 1 acre lot here wanting to have some chickens and goats, stuff like that. So it's not really, although it's an agricultural use, it's not truly
We
a
had
farming
discussed
use.
at the first meeting, Kevin, that in the interest of like
No, I agree.
trying to get through this, that we
no,
weren't going,
no.
as a committee, we were gonna table this.
No,
for another
I agree.
time.
I agree. I'm
Okay.
just emphasizing why.
Allison, you might want to choose something other than strike through, just in case that lands like on minutes or something like that. It would not leave somebody with the impression that we're deleting all of that. Is
We
there
are
a way?
deleting it. We're not submitting this.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Like, it's not part of our suggestion. We're not talking about home husbandry.
That's fine. I just didn't want somebody without the
suggestion-
context to just be like, oh no, they deleted it. So
I think we made it clear at the first
Okay.
meeting that we weren't going to discuss home husbandry, and we're not suggesting they delete home husbandry. We're just, it's not part of our, it doesn't fall into our jurisdiction or whatever. Signage, and that call was made just because we're struggling to get this done in 6 meetings. Like,
I get it. I just on this document.
It doesn't need to be edited. It's just like
I just didn't want somebody looking at it and being like, oh no, it's all struck through. That means it's gone. And I'm like, hey, not at all the case. So.
If we can get through signage before 8 o'clock, then I have some ideas that I'd like to discuss for our last meeting. But signage, in addition to the signs allowed pursuant to 9.0 of these regulations. I don't know what that means.
That's section 9 of the regulations is the sign regulation.
A farm may have an agricultural sign, farm identification signs, seasonal agricultural signs, and off-site directional signs.
All right, in north of here, in the Quad Corner, a lot of directional signage is on top of the names of the streets. Now, this is something that other towns have been able to do with their state representatives and senators. We haven't been able to do that here in Ledyard. It's something I proposed when I was part of planning and zoning, and it was not possible to do at the time. I'd like to keep that option open because it does actually drive people to your site. In other words, you could have, what happens is that the business owner pays for the signs, and the business owner or lady makes the payments on a year to maintain those signs, and is allowed up to 3 signs per business or per agricultural business. And it basically allows you then to directionally send people to your store or your site or your winery or whatever it may be. That was really accepted up in Pomfret, up in the northern part, the northeastern part of the state of Connecticut. Here in the southern part, and they do have it in Westerly, they do have it somewhat in Pawcatuck, somewhat in Stonington, here and there. It's not prolific, but again, it's something I'd like to propose, that we keep it option open
What's
for
the
that idea.
suggestion that we're modifying? Off-site directional signs are allowed, provided the nature and location do not create a nuisance or hazard. That part you're fine with.
I'm fine with that part for sure.
Permission of the property owner. You would like this part, placing directional signs in town or state-owned rights of way.
That's where it becomes a little bit of a wrinkle.
Is not allowed without the permission of the state or town.
Again, that needs a state representative to do that, and or senator to assist with that sort of process. That's something, if we kept that open rather than closing it down, then it would put an onus on the state to allow it, not us. In other words, if we shut it down, then the folks won't go to the state and say, how come? And it won't be a need. It won't be seen as a need by the state of Connecticut. Again, it is a helpful thing to find people. I know we have ways, we have all kinds of ways to getting people to our sites now that we didn't have way back when. But signage does help. We have one sign in Ledyard over by the library, and it's almost too small to be seen unless you stopped at the light. So we had a sign there across the street by Mr. Barrett's property. And because it sloped down the hill, we put it up just behind the barrier, and the state took it down. But we had a permit from Charlie, the planner, and they had to give me my sign back. They couldn't just destroy it and throw it away, because I had a permit from the city to put a sign there, but the state took it down because they didn't allow it. And I went into the state representative and to the state senator that represents our area, and they weren't able to do anything at that time.
So it's more of an issue with the state than the town.
Correct.
I'm not sure this wording, I'm not sure the wording of this zoning really limits.
It does, because directional signage within the
state.
Yeah, if you limit that, you can't put it within the right of way of the state or the town, then it does limit what you can do. Whereas I get a permit to do it way back when.
Paul,
Yes, go ahead, Kev.
this does not prohibit anybody from getting that. You just need to get the appropriate permissions. In the case there, the regulation, hold on, let me finish. In the case of the sign that you had put up that was approved by the town, it subsequently was determined it was not approved by the state. That's why it was taken down, because it was in the state right away.
Well,
any sign
But there's no
that's in the state of
regulation.
right, there's nothing we can put in the zoning regulations to say, I don't care what the state says.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I don't mean that.
But the way the wording is, it just says you can do it. You just got to get a permission from either the town or the state, whoever, depending on whose right of way you're in. And your property happens to be sitting on a state right of way, so you have to get permission from the state.
I don't think there's a way we can modify the wording that would have prevented the unfortunate situation that you experienced. Because
No.
I read this as though it's allowed, you just have to get permission.
So, yeah, okay, I'll send you what I have a whole proposal here I sent to the P&Z Planning and Zoning Group a while back. I'll dig it out and send it off to y'all and take a look at it. It's a thought. I'll leave it there. And if it's not acceptable, that's fine. But again, it's about everyone in town who's a business having directional signage, not just Paul Mogul, or not just,
No, no, I agree with you, Paul. I hear what you're saying 100%, but you still need any sign in the state right away needs the permission of state DOT.
Right. What they also fogged, Kevin, was the right of way between the state and the city. You see, the town has its own right of way as well. And so they fogged that boundary up. Was really, I asked them, where is the city? Where is the town? I brought the state guy out here to show him. And he said, well, it's over there somewhere. I said, well, where over there? Would you please define it? From the center line over. I mean, that's the kind of thing we do with planning and zoning if you want to put a building in. Or in inland wetlands, when you want to put a building in, it has to be certain distances from the center line. This is something that we need to define. Anyway, I'll leave you here. I'll send that off to you, and you can consider it or disallow it. That's fine. It's something I've fought with for a few years now.
Yeah, and I don't say that this without sympathy, but I think that in general that these signage regulations seem reasonable.
All right, what about can we add lighted signs in there then?
That's those requirements for the lighting, any sign lighting and stuff like that is all in section 9 of the, so basically saying that whatever is allowed in section 9 of the sign regulations, you can do, but these are the types of signs for an agricultural use that you're allowed to do. If the zoning regulations currently allowed an illuminated sign, then as long as it meets the requirements.
All right.
Good.
Well, it's only one sign, but it'll do. I think I'll put my money into Waze.
It's not one sign. I mean,
Yeah. What do you think, Russ?
I really don't have an opinion. I was very excited to find out that there's no sign limit applied to signs painted on a barn. Honestly, I was like, wow, who knew?
Good job.
Other than that, yeah, I've got tangled up with the DOT before, Paul. They had me pull out plants once. So, I mean, I get it. I didn't get the plants back. So that stuff happens, but it's all of that is beyond our purview. So I'm fine. Whatever. Yeah. Nothing here seems unreasonable.
which means we're at the end.
Yay.
Woohoo.
Nate must have been slowing us down.
No
My
problem.
idea, which you can all tell me is not a good one, was to go through and clean this up. And if you want me to, I mean, I feel like I want to express accountability, which I could do by doing it here in front of everyone, or I could do by sending the PDF of the draft as we finished it at tonight's meeting, and then sending a clean copy that we can start with at next meeting. But the idea would just be like to actually delete the sections we've agreed to delete, and then, remove coloring, so that at the next meeting we can start from the beginning again, with the goal of like just highlighting any areas that have come up in public comment, because we have received public comment since we opened the meeting, but we have not backtracked for any of those. And also there have been some sections that we agreed to disagree on that perhaps need to be revisited now that we have a general document to discuss.
Allison, I can't see any harm if you just saved a copy of that and just did that editing, right?
I can do
And
it without-
posted both of them on next month's agenda, that anybody could fairly and freely audit your work, I can't imagine that that would be a problem.
I
No,
agree.
and I agree. That's the normal process, as long as you keep the red line version and also you post both the red line version and the clean version. That everybody can look at, including the public. To see what we're, the final wording that we're proposal that we're looking at in a clean copy.
Yeah, I'll save it as a PDF. Like I mean, I've been attaching it to every
Yep.
In there,
meeting.
it's in there.
So I mean, if I'm allowed to do it outside the meeting, then that seems better
Yeah,
than,
no, you are, and that's, even
All
in the
of
council,
them.
that's the way we normally do it as well. You have a red line version and and a clean copy.
and so I would really like.
You need like a motion or something?
If I send the clean copy to Deb, is she allowed to send it out, or it has to wait till the next?
No, she can send it out.
Because it'd be great if you guys could take some time to go through the clean version before the next meeting, so that rather than me like reading through line by line and saying, gentlemen, is this okay? We can really just focus on the areas that we want to discuss.
That's perfectly acceptable for Deb to send out the clean copy to everyone to review. And we still have on our agendas the red line version, so we're good.
Yeah,
I can send a PDF of both and ask Deb to send them out.
That's perfectly acceptable.
if you're worried about any transparency, I don't know how early you can start posting to that agenda, but it seems like you could send it to us and just get it posted as an item on the agenda so that anybody in the town could see it right there too up for next. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know how that works, right?
If you go through Deb, I think
It's easier because we have a number of research items to go through. I don't know. I hate asking Deb to modify the agenda a million times. I try and just send her everything in one shot.
It doesn't have to get posted. It's because really it's for us to discuss at the next meeting, as long as it's posted on the agenda in the normal required frame of to meet the FOI requirements. You're perfectly good.
Is everyone in agreement of that plan? Do we need to make a motion or?
No.
Go ahead. Russ, you want to make a motion?
If you want a motion, Allison, I'll make a motion that that you clean that document up and disseminate it amongst the members of this committee for review for next meeting.
And you, in addition to that, do the original, post both of them to us and let us go through them step by step. As you say, there's a lot of places where we agree to disagree. And that may be points of discussion in the last meeting. It might be helpful. Both are, I'll second Russ's with the amendment.
And to clarify, like my goal isn't to delete something we would hope to discuss. It's just to like,
Of course, yeah.
hopefully make it a little bit easier to read.
Agreed. We all agree.
I think it makes perfect sense, Allison, and we can all vote if you seem anxious. So I vote yay that you do that.
Yeah, I'm going to get yelled at.
Yeah, no, you're not.
All right.
We will back you up.
Okay, I will go through that the document this weekend then and get that out to you guys early next week-ish. Or well, I guess not because Monday's a holiday. By within the week, depending on Miss Dobson's schedule, and that should give you 3 weeks to prepare some discussion points for our last meeting. Good.
Agreed.
I don't think there was anything else on the agenda. So does anyone want to make, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion. Make the motion if you want.
Make the motion. Yeah, well. Kevin made the motion.
Oh, I'll second the motion.
Russell seconds Mr. Holmberg seconds the motion, and the meeting will. I'm tired today. I'm sorry.
All right.
The meeting will end at 7:40 p.m. And
Thank you, Allison.
Thank
Thanks
you,
a
Allison.
bunch.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to stop the sharing. I wonder if it'll announce it.
Let me see if I can.
Yes, it will.
Oh, it's gone.
As soon as you hit stop recording, it'll say, we stopped recording.